WNBA finals. And so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. You know, I'm a human too. I have a family. I have 2 kids who are devastated by these comments. And so all I'll say is just, you know, it's obviously...
Imagine being the most talked about, scrutinized, and financially powerful athlete in your entire sport, yet your official employer pays you less than a middle management accountant. This is the staggering, almost unbelievable reality for Caitlin Clark, a player who has completely rewired the economics of women's basketball in a matter of months. Recently, whispers of a monumental partnership with Gatorade began circulating, with industry insiders hinting at a multi-year agreement laden with incentives that could push its total value to an astronomical $50 million. When you stack that alongside her reported $28 million signature shoe deal with Nike, her lucrative partnerships with Wilson, State Farm, and Panini, a deeply uncomfortable truth emerges. Caitlin Clark is generating a personal economy that rivals the valuation of entire sports franchises. Yet, when she steps onto the hardwood for the Indiana Fever, her rookie contract dictates a salary of just over $76,000. This isn't just a quirky sports trivia fact. It is the epicenter of a massive behind-the-scenes crisis. The disparity between what the corporate world believes Clark is worth and what her own league is legally allowed to pay her has reportedly sent shockwaves through the WNBA's executive offices. It is a financial paradox so extreme that it has supposedly triggered a private meltdown for WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, who is now tasked with managing a global superstar trapped inside an infrastructure that was never built to contain her. But the tension brewing in the league offices was only the beginning of the chaos. To truly understand the panic at the top, you have to look at the sheer scale of the corporate money flowing toward this single 22-year-old rookie. Gatorade does not hand out $50 million incentive packages to just anyone. Their roster is reserved for generational icons like Michael Jordan, Serena Williams, and Tiger Woods. By bringing Clark into that exclusive fold, the corporate world made a definitive statement that her brand transcends women's basketball and sits firmly in the realm of global pop culture. Nike echoed that sentiment, engaging in a fierce bidding war against Under Armour and Adidas before securing her loyalty with a massive upfront commitment and the promise of a signature shoe line. And these corporations are placing bets on Clark's ability to move merchandise, sell beverages, and drive cultural conversations on a global scale. But while the executives in Portland and Chicago pop champagne over these partnerships, the WNBA headquarters in New York is left dealing with a humiliating optic. Every time a new multi-million-dollar endorsement is announced, it acts as a glaring spotlight, illuminating the financial inadequacy of the league itself. The WNBA is in the incredibly awkward position of heavily promoting a player who makes almost all of her fortune outside of their ecosystem. It creates a dangerous dynamic where the player holds exponentially more financial leverage and public influence than the commissioner, flipping the traditional power structure of professional sports entirely upside down. And the reasons behind this restrictive financial cage are far more complicated than simple corporate greed. The root of this paralyzing financial imbalance lies buried deep within the legal labyrinth of the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement. Negotiated in 2020, this CBA was heralded as a major victory at the time, providing increased maternity benefits, better travel accommodations, and a slightly higher salary cap. However, it was drafted with a mindset of slow, steady survival, meticulously designed to protect the financial stability of owners who had historically operated their teams at a loss. It implemented a strict, inflexible rookie wage scale to prevent bidding wars and ensure competitive balance. Nobody in the room during those negotiations could have predicted the arrival of a phenomenon who would instantly sell out arenas nationwide and shatter television viewership records that had stood for decades. Now, that same CBA acts as a straitjacket. It legally prohibits the Indiana Fever, or any other team, from paying Clark a salary that reflects her actual market value. Even if the Fever's ownership wanted to hand her a $5 million contract tomorrow to reward her for the unprecedented ticket sales and merchandise revenue she has generated, the league rules strictly forbid it. Kathy Engelbert, a former CEO of Deloitte who prides herself on financial pragmatism, is now watching her most valuable asset operate under an archaic compensation model. And the league is currently incapable of financially rewarding the very person who is single-handedly pulling it out of cultural obscurity. And this structural flaw has cultivated a deeply toxic environment that inevitably spilled out onto the hardwood. The financial disparity between Clark and the rest of the league quickly mutated into a palpable physical friction during actual games. You have a rookie arriving in private jets, funded by her corporate sponsors, stepping onto the court against veterans who have spent a decade grinding overseas during the off-season just to make a livable wage. This underlying resentment became painfully obvious during a highly publicized matchup against the Chicago Sky. In a moment that dominated sports television for weeks, Chicago guard Kennedy Carter delivered a vicious, blindsided hip check to Clark during a dead ball, knocking the rookie straight to the floor. While physical play is a staple of professional basketball, the context surrounding this foul made it explosive. Carter was seen mouthing hostile words before the hit, and her refusal to answer questions about it during the post-game press conference only poured gasoline on the fire. This wasn't just a tough foul. The public overwhelmingly interpreted it as a manifestation of deep-seated jealousy and a deliberate attempt by the league's old guard to physically intimidate the new face of the sport. It echoed earlier, ominous comments made by WNBA legend Diana Taurasi, who warned that reality is coming for the incoming rookie class. And the media narrative rapidly shifted from celebrating Clark's arrival to questioning whether the WNBA's veteran players were actively trying to sabotage their own golden goose out of pure spite. For the commissioner, this was an absolute public relations nightmare. She had to navigate the impossible task of defending the tough, competitive nature of her league, while simultaneously assuring corporate sponsors and millions of new fans that their favorite player wasn't being targeted by a syndicate of resentful veterans. But just as the dust began to settle on the physical altercations, a completely different kind of controversy threatened to derail the league's momentum. The rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese had already proven to be the most lucrative storyline in the history of women's college basketball, and its transition to the professional ranks brought an unprecedented level of media scrutiny. Every interaction, every statistical comparison, and every physical contest between the two rookies was dissected by national media outlets with a ferocity normally reserved for presidential debates. While this rivalry drove massive television ratings and sold-out arenas, it also brought a wave of toxic, polarizing discourse that the league office was entirely unprepared to handle. The narrative often devolved into ugly cultural and racial debates across social media platforms, forcing the WNBA to constantly release statements condemning fan behavior while desperately trying to keep the focus on the actual sport. Engelbert found herself walking an agonizingly thin tightrope. On one hand, the Clark-Reese dynamic was generating the kind of mainstream relevance the WNBA had craved for 27 years. On the other hand, the toxicity surrounding it threatened to alienate the massive influx of casual viewers and spook the very corporate sponsors who were just beginning to invest heavily in the league. The commissioner was forced to play referee not just on the court, but in the court of public opinion, trying to harness the immense gravitational pull of this rivalry without letting it tear the league's fragile reputation apart. And yet, the most shocking blow to the sport's global expansion wouldn't come from a rival player or a controversial foul, but from a boardroom decision that left the entire sporting world stunned. In a move that defies all conventional marketing logic, the USA Basketball announced its roster for the Paris Olympics, and Caitlin Clark's name was completely absent. The selection committee defended their decision by citing a need for veteran experience, team chemistry, and a respect for the players who had spent years within the national team system. They pointed to a roster loaded with WNBA champions and multiple-time gold medalists, insisting that a rookie simply hadn't earned her stripes yet. However, the public backlash was immediate, overwhelming, and utterly brutal. Sports analysts, casual fans, and even athletes from other sports publicly lambasted the decision, calling it one of the most catastrophic marketing fumbles in the history of global athletics. The Olympic Games represent the ultimate international stage, at a rare opportunity to showcase a sport to billions of people who might not otherwise tune in. By leaving their most recognizable and culturally relevant star at home, the establishment of women's basketball essentially chose traditional hierarchy over unprecedented global exposure. They sacrificed millions in potential viewership and untold amounts of international merchandise sales just to maintain the status quo. While Kathy Engelbert does not control the USA Basketball Selection Committee, the fallout from this disastrous decision landed squarely on her shoulders. It reinforced a growing, damaging narrative that the institutions governing women's basketball were stubborn, out of touch, and actively resisting the massive wave of new interest that Clark had generated. It made the WNBA look like a minor league operation incapable of recognizing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, further fueling the commissioner's internal panic. But while the Olympic snub damaged the league's global potential, a far more dangerous logistical crisis was brewing right in their own backyard. For years, WNBA players had loudly and consistently begged the league to provide charter flights, citing the physical toll of flying commercial and the logistical nightmares of navigating public airports with towering athletes. The league's standard response was always that the economics simply didn't support the massive expense. But the arrival of Caitlin Clark instantly shattered that financial excuse through sheer necessity. Early in the season, the videos began circulating online showing Clark and her teammates being ambushed by aggressive fans, paparazzi, and media personalities while trying to walk through public airport terminals. The situation quickly escalated from a frustrating inconvenience to a legitimate security threat. The Fever players were being swarmed in baggage claims, creating dangerous bottlenecks and exposing the athletes to potential harm. Engelbert was suddenly faced with the terrifying prospect of a high-profile security incident involving the most famous athlete in the country occurring on her watch. The slow, measured financial planning of the past was immediately thrown out the window. In a frantic, mid-season scramble, the league announced a sudden partnership with Delta to provide charter flights for all 12 teams. While this was framed publicly as a massive step forward for player welfare, behind the scenes, it was a desperate, incredibly expensive Band-Aid applied to a gaping logistical wound. The league had to miraculously find tens of millions of dollars to fund this initiative overnight, entirely because they had underestimated the sheer magnitude of the celebrity they were dealing with. It was yet another glaring example of the WNBA operating in a state of constant reaction, forced to completely rewrite its operational playbook on the fly just to keep up with the chaos surrounding a single player. And all of this logistical scrambling was leading up to the most critical negotiation in the history of the sport. The ultimate test for Kathy Engelbert and the true reason for the intense pressure inside the league office. All comes down to the impending renegotiation of the WNBA's national media rights deals. The current television contracts, which bring in roughly $60 million a year, are set to expire soon. In the landscape of modern sports broadcasting, that number is practically pocket change. Engelbert knows that her entire legacy, and potentially her job, hinges on her ability to multiply that number significantly. She finally has the ultimate bargaining chip, the staggering television ratings driven by the Clark effect. Networks are seeing viewership numbers for fever games that rival major NBA broadcasts, and Engelbert must use that unprecedented leverage to secure a historic financial windfall for the league. But this high-stakes poker game is fraught with danger. And if she fails to secure a massive new TV deal that dramatically increases league revenue, the Players Association will inevitably revolt. They will look at the sold-out arenas, the record-breaking ratings, and the massive endorsement deals, and they will demand to know why their salaries are still artificially suppressed by an outdated CBA. A failure at the negotiating table could trigger a devastating player strike, bringing the league's golden era to a screeching halt just as it begins. Conversely, if she secures the money, she then faces the daunting task of appeasing veterans who want back pay for their years of suffering, while simultaneously rewriting the financial rules to ensure a superstar like Clark can finally be paid her true worth by the franchise that employs her. It is a labyrinth of financial and political landmines, and one wrong step could detonate the entire operation. We are watching a legacy institution desperately trying to modernize itself in real time, buckling under the immense weight of a single player's gravity. Caitlin Clark has not just exposed the financial inequities of the WNBA, she has fundamentally broken its old operational model. The massive Gatorade and Nike deals stand as towering monuments to her individual power, casting a long, uncomfortable shadow over a league that is still trying to figure out how to capitalize on her existence. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is trapped in the center of this storm, attempting to manage veteran resentment, navigate toxic media narratives, solve massive logistical security threats, and negotiate billion-dollar television contracts all at once. And the WNBA has been handed the greatest gift in the history of professional sports marketing, but it arrived wrapped in a ticking time bomb of structural inadequacy. The next few years will not just determine the trajectory of Caitlin Clark's basketball career, they will definitively answer whether the WNBA can adapt and survive this unprecedented influx of fame, or if the system will completely collapse under the blinding pressure of its own long-awaited spotlight.